Welcome back, guys. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Today I'd like to talk about the Resident Evil Village Showcase. This year marks the 25th anniversary for Resident Evil, which means this franchise has been around longer than I have. Resident Evil is my favorite game series of all time, and I've been keeping tabs on it almost every week since the late 2000s, just after finishing 4. Now 4 isn't the first game I played in this franchise, it was 3, but 4 is the one that really got me into this. I started looking up everything on Wikipedias, the wikis, everything. I just fell in love with this franchise. Now lately I've been seeing this very funny trend where people just shit on Resident Evil 4 for no reason. They claim it's the start of Resident Evil's downfall, but that's not true, that's incorrect. The downfall actually started with 5, right after Shinji Mikami left. Now for those of you who are newcomers to this franchise, Shinji Mikami is basically the man who started all of this. This man was the director of Resident Evil Remake, and Resident Evil 4. The last two are constantly referred to as some of the greatest games in the Resident Evil franchise. Not just that, they're also considered some of the best horror games ever made. And I am one of those people who wholeheartedly agree with this sentiment. In fact, I'd go even one step further than that. Resident Evil 4 isn't just one of the best horror games ever made, it's one of the best games ever made. Now sure, okay, it doesn't do what Resident Evil 1 all the way to Code Veronica did, but the trade-off here is that you got an overall better game, while also still retaining some of the core values of the previous titles. Most notably, the two core pillars are action and horror, and Resident Evil 4 does an amazing job at blending the two together. Everything Resident Evil 4 changes, it substitutes with something greater. And also, just to clarify, I will be making videos about Resident Evil 4 down the line, but for now I'm only bringing this up because Resident Evil Village, aka Resident Evil 8, takes a whole lot of inspiration from Resident Evil 4. Now this should not come as a surprise to anyone, it was pretty obvious back when the first trailer came out, but now that they've showcased this thing, it is crystal clear that that's what they're going for. And I, for one, could not be happier with the direction they're taking with this one. I'm strictly talking about Resident Evil Village's campaign, because everything else about the showcase is hit or miss for me. Unfortunately, I did not enjoy this showcase at all. It has done absolutely nothing to convince me more or less to buy the game. Ever since the announcement, I've been on the fence on whether or not to get this game day one. But after watching the showcase, I'm still on the fence. I wouldn't even call it a showcase, this was just a pre-order announcement with some teasers thrown in. They went way too far with asking people to pre-order this thing. Now don't get me wrong, it is understandable, they are a business after all, and businesses are there to make money. But doing such a thing right after Resident Evil 3 had such mixed reception and left such a bad taste in everybody's mouths, I don't think that was a smart move. When you look at the gaming landscape these days, it takes so little to ruin your reputation as a video game company. Just look at CD Projekt Red. Regardless of being overrated or not, CD Projekt Red was the most respected company in the whole gaming industry. And within just days of releasing Cyberpunk 2077, they threw their whole company down the toilet, along with the goodwill they've garnered over the years. Now usually I would follow this statement with, companies should take note from this disaster, but if there is one company that already knows this by now, it is Capcom. You would think they'd have learned their lesson after releasing Resident Evil 5 and 6, but I guess not. It's safe to say that the old Capcom is back, shoving multiplayer game after multiplayer game within their single-player games. Which leads me to my second big concern about this quote-unquote showcase, and that is the multiplayer mode that is coming with Resident Evil Village. Now usually when game companies say that a multiplayer mode is coming for free with the game, I usually think that's good news, but when it comes to Capcom, I usually see it as a red flag. Capcom's track record with multiplayer games has never been good to begin with. The only multiplayer game from Resident Evil that's even worth a damn was Resident Evil Outbreak. People have been clamoring for a remake or a file number 3 for years now, and Capcom never looked at it again. The way I see it, Capcom keeps sweeping Resident Evil Outbreak under the rug for the same reasons they kept ignoring Code Veronica and Resident Evil Remake. All three have a common denominator, one of them being that they all released at a time when the Resident Evil formula was getting stale. The other common denominator being that they're all victims of circumstance. Both Code Veronica and the Resident Evil Remake were hurt by the exclusivity deal signed for the Dreamcast and the GameCube respectively. On the other hand, the problem with the Outbreak series is that they released at the wrong place at the wrong time. When Resident Evil Outbreak came out, the PlayStation 3 was right around the corner. If they had only waited a few more years and delayed it and put it on the PlayStation 3 instead, taking full advantage of the online capabilities, I think that the Resident Evil Outbreak games could have sold much better, and then Capcom would have listened and paid much more attention to those titles. But instead we're getting Resident Evil Verse, or Resident Evil Reverse, or Reverse Resident Evil. I don't have a clue, the titles just keep getting worse. What I do know, however, is that I am not interested one bit in this multiplayer game. Other than that, I also think it could reverse Get it? Everything that Resident Evil has done right in the past 5 years. For those of you who don't have the attention span of a goldfish, you would remember a little game called Resident Evil 3 quote-unquote remake coming out last year. It was supposed to be a total remake of Resident Evil 3 and a sequel to Resident Evil 2 remake that comes with a free multiplayer mode, but instead what it felt like to me was I was paying for the multiplayer mode and then I got a free Resident Evil 2 DLC that was cut out from Resident Evil 2 and got reworked into a slightly longer side campaign. Now I know, Resident Evil 3 Remake and Resistance were developed by two separate development teams. However, when it comes to management, time constraints, and budget constraints, I'm pretty sure that upper management had to still decide whether to prioritize Resident Evil 3 Remake or the Resistance. And since Resistance is a multiplayer mode, where people could keep coming back over and over for the long term, whereas Resident Evil 3 Remake was just a short campaign with some replay value, I think it's safe to say that Resident Evil Resistance was given the priority here. Now again, I'm not shitting on these games. The new Resident Evil 3, while being a total failure at a remake, is still an amazing game in its own right. And Resident Evil Resistance, however little I played it, I had fun with it. It's just not for me. I will also make a review of Resident Evil 3 down the line, and I can tell you right now, I'll tell you this, the game's cheaper now, and it's much more value for money. If you want to go get it, you should get it. It is a good game. Especially if you're a newcomer to this franchise. If you want to go get it, be my guest, man. Just go get it. More power to you. Hell, maybe it would even convince you to buy the old games, the better ones. Welcome to the family, son. But you have to understand that at some point in time, especially last year, this was not value for money. This was 60 fucking euros back here in Europe. And now as we're moving into the PlayStation 5 generation, some of the games are even going up to 78 euros. So forgive me for sounding not too optimistic about this. And the argument about inflation doesn't even matter when you consider that microtransactions are in this game and they make up more than enough money back. In fact, ever since microtransactions started to become a thing, gaming has never seen more profits. It's not like we're talking about state-of-the-art graphics Sony exclusive single-player games here. I think those games get to have a pass because they don't have microtransactions in them. And with how much the gaming industry has grown, now literally competing with the movie industry, the budget costs are out of this world. Now this is mostly a Sony exclusives issue. When it comes to every other multi-platform game, I do not agree with the price jump, especially if you put microtransactions in your game. With that being said, that was my opinion on Reverse or Resident Evil First or whatever the hell it's called. The only reason I even brought that game up is because I am genuinely concerned as to how the development over the multiplayer modes will affect the single player mode. How will the single player game be affected? Will it have cut content? Will they have cut corners? If the multiplayer mode gets more priority here, does that mean that the campaign mode will have more time and budget constraints and therefore become a more rushed product than it needs to be? Now you're gonna have some genius in the comments who's gonna say, you idiot, these games are developed by two different studios. They outsource the multiplayer to someone else. Yes, however, the game comes out as one product, which means Capcom only has one shot at making money back from two games, if they actually are two separate games. And it's not just that, if Capcom wanted to consider these as two separate games, they would have easily made this game as something you'd buy separately. However, the way I see it, they don't plan on making money back from the separate game, they want you to buy it with the game, so that you can make money back from microtransactions. And unless the campaign is worth every penny when you spend 60 euros or dollars for a Resident Evil Village, just like Resident Evil 3, I'm gonna feel like I bought the multiplayer mode and got the campaign for free instead of the other way around. However, not all of it is doom and gloom. A very huge probability as to why Resident Evil 3 Remake wasn't as good as Resident Evil 2 is that Resident Evil 3 Remake was developed by M2 Studio, whereas Resident Evil 2 Remake was developed by Capcom R&D Division 1. It is most likely that R&D Division 1 had a head start because M2 Studios is a new studio and was probably created in the first place so that they can outsource the Resident Evil 3 Remake to them. They were also probably a smaller team, so even if they had a similar amount of time to finish the game, they probably had less manpower to do so and had to think of a way to make the game polished while also cutting corners just to save time. However, when it comes to Resident Evil Village, it is the same developers behind Resident Evil 7, and Resident Evil 7 turned out to be very good. Personally for me, it is the best Resident Evil to come out since Resident Evil 4, and because of that, I still have hopes for this game. So with that out of the way, that leaves only one thing, and that is to talk about what I absolutely love and can't wait to see in Resident Evil 8 Village. Now, as I already previously stated, thanks to Resident Evil 3 and how poorly handled that game was, And thanks to how Resident Evil Village development is copying Resident Evil 3 in terms of shoving a multiplayer mode no one asked for with the game, I'm not gonna buy day one, and I'm simply gonna wait for reviews first. And when I say reviews, I'm not referring to mainstream reviews or shills on YouTube. The biggest reason being is I don't own a PS5 yet, and I'm very concerned about the PlayStation 4 version. But I'm hoping for the best, as the PlayStation 5 version so far hasn't impressed me that much. It looks amazing, but I don't see a big jump from PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5. If it's just a few frame dips or maybe less graphical fidelity here and there, then I'm all for it. It's okay. PlayStation 4 is an old system now, even the Pro. But if we're talking about a massive downgrade, like it doesn't even run, like Cyberpunk, then I'm out. But I highly doubt that that's the case, because Capcom has made some of the most impressive games on the PlayStation 4. They have proven time and time again with Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil 7, Devil May Cry 5, that the RE engine is not a joke. Every single one of these titles I've mentioned are some of the best looking and the best running PlayStation 4 games. And given that Resident Evil Village will also be running on the RE engine, I think the PlayStation 4 version will do just fine. Actually, you know what? As I've been going through the process of making this video, I've been kind of wondering if a PlayStation 4 specific review of this game would actually be a very interesting video to make, and it's kind of intriguing me. So let me know in the comments down below, would you be interested if I were to make a PlayStation 4 specific review of Resident Evil Village? Also, if you do happen to be scrolling down to type your comment, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and also ring the notification bell. Now on to the good stuff. First thing I love, right off the bat, is the setting. This is literally Bloodborne. Everywhere I look in this game, it is big time Canehurst Castle vibes, and also Hemwick Chernal Lane, and I am down for this. I think that the message Capcom is trying to convey to the audience with this setting is a very promising one. Not only does this suggest that Capcom is looking up to Resident Evil 4, one of the greatest games ever made, for inspiration, judging from the castle, the creepy farms and villages, but it's also looking for inspiration from Bloodborne, which needs no introduction if you're a PS4 player. You know that Bloodborne is one of the greatest titles to come out for this system. If you take a look at any top lists for the PlayStation 4 games, Bloodborne is always going to be in the top 5. Possibly even top 3, and a lot of times it is number 1. It is truly a masterpiece. It is an action game, but what a lot of people don't give it enough credit for is that it is just as much of a horror game. Does that ring a bell? Now, before I continue, there's something I gotta say. The villains look great, but I don't see why people are losing their shit over this woman. I see why it's happening, but, well, first of all, there's 2 reasons. The more I stay on the internet, the weirder it gets. It is such a double-edged sword. On one hand, you've got this large group of people just drooling over this fake video game character. It's so funny. It's not like she's a real woman. I mean, she is. They probably used photogrammetry to scan that face in, but the rest of it, probably not real. But on the other hand, it also gave us some gold, top quality memes, let me tell you that. But hey, I'm not shitting on you. Like what you like. Different strokes for different folks. It's just not for me. I just love me some good old memes. Thank you so much for the memes. The internet never disappoints. But yeah, the villains so far look amazing. So the details that are out so far is this 9-foot-long bombshell that Capcom just dropped on everyone. Her name is supposed to be Lady Alcina Dimitrescu. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not sure. Let me know. I also don't know if her first name is confirmed, but I'm pretty sure her surname is. So I'm just gonna refer to her as Lady Dimitrescu for now. The third trailer that Capcom released also has an implication that the women that stalk you in the castle, those are her daughters. It should come as no shock to everyone that the internet also lost their shit for these 3 hooded women that stalk you around. What concerns me is, they seem to function just like Marguerite Baker. They just stalk you around with insects flying everywhere, and I'm not too keen on that. But at least this time you're not being chased around by someone who looks like they got hit by a truck, so I think that evens it out. There also seems to be a 4th villain in this game, the guy who is straight out of Bloodborne. Who is this guy? We don't know. But my bet is that he is Lady Dimitrescu's little brother, or the Heisenberg character that she is referring to on the phone. My guess is he's both. The reason I think both of them are referring to the same person is because she says, "You escaped my little brother's idiot games," and then on the phone she says, "He escaped that fool Heisenberg." Notice how in both scenes she has that same condescending tone. It's as if she's talking about the same person. It's either that, or this woman looks down upon everyone with a superiority complex as big as her hat. I don't know for sure, we'll wait and see. He also seems to have the ability to levitate objects. He kind of reminds me of Evelyn from Resident Evil 7. Now, whether or not the mold from Resident Evil 7 has anything to do with this game, that remains to be seen. And speaking of mold and other types of viruses, here's the next thing I like: the enemies. More specifically, the enemy variety. RE7 Biohazard, as wonderful as that game was, it had one glaring flaw, and that was the enemy variety. The only thing you fought in that game were the bakers, some molded, and a few insects. That's about it. The variety in this trailer alone is already a major upgrade. On to the next thing that I absolutely love about this game already, and that is the sound of the gunshots. If I didn't know any better as a consumer, I'd buy this game day one just for the shotgun alone. If you hear the shotgun from this trailer and then compare it to the shotgun in Resident Evil 7 or the remakes, this is clearly a major step up. It makes the old shotgun sound like wet farts. I also noticed that the pistol, the Lemmy pistol, sounds like the guns from Revelations 2, which is also a good thing in my book. Obviously, I would prefer if they had the G19 sound for these guns, but whatever. Revelations 2 gun sounds, they're fine. Still an upgrade from 7 and the remakes. Sticking with the topic of guns, the next thing I totally love about this is something that's finally making a comeback from Resident Evil 4, and that is a proper merchant. Now, this is not the same merchant from Resident Evil 4, but he does seem like yet another mysterious figure and a comedy relief. Now, contrary to some popular belief on the internet, I don't think the merchant is gonna hurt the game. I think he's gonna add more to it. As a franchise, Resident Evil always hits its biggest peaks when it doesn't take itself too seriously. To me, he gives off that Tim Burton's Danny DeVito penguin vibes, and I don't know, it kinda suits him. I think it makes him stand out. He does seem like a peculiar and interesting fellow, I'll give Capcom that. But whether or not he actually ends up being an interesting character is irrelevant to me. What is relevant to me is what he offers, and that is guns and customization. One thing that I find super interesting is that Capcom is not just taking a page out of Resident Evil 4 or Bloodborne for that matter. It seems to me like they're also taking a page out of Revelations 2. So it seems to me like not only can you upgrade your weapons, but you can also add attachments to them. See the little sockets at the bottom left corner? That's what they are. In Revelations 2, you didn't buy upgrades. You would find weapon parts and then go to a bench and then mix and match the parts according to your likings and playstyle. I enjoyed this feature a lot in Revelations 2. It gave the combat some more depth and variation to it. It is so refreshing to see Capcom going back to the drawing board and taking ideas from the two best weapon upgrade systems they've ever had, and mixing and matching, trying to find the best of both worlds to come up with something new. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but this new amalgamation of two systems could lead to something better. You know how it goes. If it's not broken, don't fix it. I'm still not convinced that this is gonna be a better upgrade system than 4 had, but still, it's gonna add some much needed replay value, which is a very good thing. Also, I am wondering if Capcom is gonna bring back exclusive upgrades for different weapons. If that thing makes a return, I'm losing my shit. I'm not expecting anything, I know better than to do that, but it would be cool. 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 No doubt. So what are my final thoughts on this showcase? Overall, I didn't like it. I just hate it when companies go full Rambo on asking for pre-orders. I think it's off-putting. I'm just saying, if a grand piano were to fall on a mouse right now, it would still be more subtle than Capcom asking for pre-orders. I also don't think the multiplayer is something anybody asked for, but I'm sure there's gonna be some people who will enjoy it. But just like most of Capcom's attempts at multiplayer, this will just fizzle out. As for Infinite Darkness on Netflix, it's no longer gonna be a TV show, it's now gonna be a movie. But it's okay, I'm still looking forward to that. And last but not least, I am super hyped about Resident Evil Village. I have some concerns as to what they're not showing and why, but what they are showing is absolutely phenomenal. It looks so promising. It looks like it's shaping up to be a wonderful blend of Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 7, with some hints of Code Veronica in there as well, while simultaneously being interwoven with the vibe and horror design of Bloodborne, with some slight hints of that Tim Burton, Henry Selick aesthetic/art style. If the Van Helsing movie from 2004 was ever turned into a first-person horror game, this would be it, and I'm loving it. So that concludes my review of the Resident Evil Showcase. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and drop a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. If you are new to this channel, welcome to Rayven Draws, the channel where I do reviews, discussions, and also drawings of video games and movies that I like to talk about. Once again, guys, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.